When installing a 100 amp subpanel in a detached garage, it's important to select the correct cable type and size to ensure safe and reliable operation. Service entrance underground SEU cable is not appropriate in this situation. SEU cable is designed for direct burial applications and is not suitable for exposure to sunlight or other outdoor elements. Because a portion of the cable run will be above ground, it cannot be used. Underground feeder off cable is the recommended choice for feeding a detached garage. UF cable is designed for direct burial, exposure to sunlight, and use in both wet and dry locations. It can also be installed in raceways or conduits for added protection. Regarding cable size, 2-2-2 aluminum cable is insufficient for a 100 amp subpanel, while 3-4 American wire gauge (AUG) aluminum conductors are typically used for 100 amp service. Voltage drop must be considered for longer runs. With a run of 60 feet, it is necessary to increase the conductor size to 2 AWG aluminum to mitigate voltage drop. Grounding is another crucial aspect of the installation. You must run 4 conductors from the main panel in the house to the subpanel in the garage. Firstly, 2 hot conductors, secondly 1 neutral conductor, and thirdly 1 ground conductor. The ground conductor should be the same size as the current carrying conductors, which is 2 AWG aluminum in this case. While running the cable inside a conduit in the basement is not mandatory, it is advisable to protect it from potential damage. This can be achieved by using a raceway or securing the cable to the wall with cable clips. Based on these factors, the recommended cable for this application is 4-2 AWG UFB aluminum cable consisting of 3 hot conductors and 1 ground conductor. Here's a more detailed breakdown of the considerations. Firstly, ensure that the main panel in the house has adequate capacity to handle the additional 100 amp load imposed by the subpanel in the garage. This involves assessing the existing load on the main panel and calculating the new total load to determine if the panel's capacity is sufficient. If the main panel's capacity is insufficient, it may be necessary to upgrade the main panel to a larger size. Secondly, install a grounding electrode system at the garage. This typically involves driving 2 ground rods into the earth at least 8 feet apart and bonding them to the subpanel and the grounding conductor. The purpose of the grounding electrode system is to provide a path to ground for fault currents, which helps to protect against electrical shock and equipment damage. Thirdly, label the subpanel in the garage as a subpanel and indicate the circuit breaker size that feeds it from the main panel. This is important for safety and troubleshooting purposes, as it allows anyone working on the electrical system to quickly identify the source of power for the subpanel. The National Electrical Code (NEC) provides detailed requirements for electrical installations, including those for detached garages. It is essential to consult the NEC and local electrical codes to ensure that the installation complies with all applicable regulations. Some key NEC articles relevant to this installation include: firstly, Article 225, which covers outside branch circuits and feeders; secondly, Article 250, which addresses grounding and bonding; and thirdly, Article 310, which pertains to conductors for general wiring. When selecting UF cable, ensure that it is rated for the appropriate voltage and ampacity for the application. UFB cable is a common type of UF cable that is suitable for residential wiring. It is typically rated for 600 volts and has a temperature rating of 90 degrees Celsius. When installing the UF cable, follow the manufacturer's instructions and the requirements of the NEC. Ensure that the cable is properly supported and protected from physical damage. When making connections, use appropriate connectors and ensure that they are properly tightened. Aluminum conductors require the use of connectors that are specifically designed for aluminum wire. These connectors are typically made of aluminum or copper and are coated with an antioxidant compound to prevent corrosion. When connecting the conductors to the subpanel, ensure that the connections are clean and tight. Use a torque wrench to tighten the connectors to the manufacturer's specified torque. This will ensure that the connections are secure and prevent overheating. When installing the ground rods, drive them into the earth until they are fully buried. The top of the ground rod should be at least 8 feet below grade. Connect the ground rods to the subpanel and the grounding conductor using approved grounding clamps. Ensure that the clamps are properly tightened to provide a secure connection. When labeling the subpanel, use a permanent marker or label maker to clearly identify the panel as a subpanel and indicate the circuit breaker size that feeds it from the main panel. This will help to prevent confusion and ensure that the electrical system is properly maintained. Consider a few more details as well. Firstly, voltage drop is a significant concern when running long distances of electrical cable. Voltage drop occurs when the voltage at the end of the cable is lower than the voltage at the beginning of the cable. This can cause lights to dim, motors to run slower, and appliances to malfunction. To minimize voltage drop, it is important to select the correct conductor size. The NEC provides tables that can be used to determine the appropriate conductor size for a given load and distance. Secondly, grounding is essential for electrical safety. Grounding provides a path for fault currents to flow back to the source, which helps to protect against electrical shock and equipment damage. The NEC requires that all electrical equipment be properly grounded. Thirdly, bonding is the process of connecting all metal parts of the electrical system together to create a low impedance path for fault currents. Bonding helps to prevent electrical shock and equipment damage. The NEC requires that all metal parts of the electrical system be properly bonded. In addition to the above considerations, it is important to follow all applicable safety precautions when working with electricity. Always turn off the power before working on any electrical equipment. Wear appropriate personal protective equipment, such as gloves and safety glasses. If you are not comfortable working with electricity, hire a qualified electrician to do the work. It is essential to consult with a qualified electrician to ensure that the installation meets all applicable codes and standards. This will help to ensure that the electrical system is safe and reliable. Remember, the use of appropriate connectors for aluminum conductors is critical. Aluminum and copper are dissimilar metals and can cause corrosion when directly connected. Using dual-rated connectors or connectors specifically designed for aluminum wire prevents this corrosion. Furthermore, when tightening connections, following the manufacturer's torque specifications is essential. Over-tightening can damage the connector or the wire, while under-tightening can lead to loose connections, causing overheating and potentially fires. Also, documenting the electrical installation, including wire sizes, circuit breaker sizes, and grounding details, is a good practice. This documentation can be helpful for future maintenance, troubleshooting, and electrical inspections. When selecting the location for the ground rods, consider soil conditions. Moist soil provides a better connection to ground than dry soil. If possible, choose a location that is consistently moist. And when driving ground rods, be careful not to damage underground utilities. Call before you dig to ensure that there are no buried cables or pipes in the area. Furthermore, consider installing a surge protector at the subpanel in the garage. Surge protectors help to protect sensitive electronic equipment from damage caused by voltage surges. Lastly, the NEC requires that all electrical work be performed by a qualified electrician. While this may not be enforced in your area, it is always best to hire a qualified electrician to ensure that the work is done safely and correctly. In addition, remember that local codes may have specific requirements for electrical installations in detached garages. It is important to check with the local building department to ensure that the installation meets all applicable codes. Here are some final reminders. Firstly, always disconnect power before working on any electrical circuits. Secondly, use appropriate safety equipment, including gloves and safety glasses. Thirdly, double-check all connections to ensure they are tight and secure. Fourthly, label all circuits clearly and accurately. And fifthly, if you are unsure about any aspect of the electrical installation, consult a qualified electrician. By following these guidelines, you can ensure that the installation is safe, reliable, and compliant with all applicable codes and standards.